Hello. In part two of our Verity training video, we're going to be focusing on pulling together a working set for analysis. Verity does not run on every single item inside of Navisworks. That would take too long, and you probably don't want to look at all those nuts and bolts individually. So instead, we use the various selection tools in Navisworks to identify which elements you want to analyze and which scans you want to analyze, bring those into Verity, and then run the analysis. So we're going to start looking at selecting those items in Navisworks and different tools to do that. We're going to go through adding them to Verity, and then some tools to refine that working set in Verity. So to get started, first we'll take a look at Navisworks here. There's multiple ways to select things in Navisworks. You can do different manual selection options, so everything from picking individual items, control and shift work if you want to control works if you want to pick multiple items in the 3D view, shift works if you want to pick multiple items in the selection tree. So you can get to items both ways, through the 3D view and through the selection tree over here. In addition, Navisworks has some robust tools for building up search and selection sets. So you'll see here we've got some pre-made sets in our training database for demos, for training, and then for different scopes of work. So these are done as selection sets in our file because this is a static project. In a project that's in the construction process, your NWF will be changing all the time, and so you'll probably want to use search sets instead, which leverage the Find Items tool to build up different parameters and values that it searches for, and then builds up dynamic sets based on that. So I'll go ahead and hide that back down. And we'll do a couple examples of picking things. So you can, as I mentioned, pick individually. And then once you have a group of items selected, we add those to Verity using the Add to Verity button in the Verity tab in Navisworks. This will open up a project for you, and as mentioned in the first training video, that's going to be named based off of your NWF file name and dropped into the same folder. And then we will open up a new analysis as well, and that analysis will basically be the container for all those different objects. So I'm going to go ahead and make Navisworks a little bit smaller here so that we can see Verity and Navisworks side by side. So you'll see that those items I picked over on the left are here in Verity now. And as we select these items in Verity, you'll see that they're also selecting them in Navisworks. So we maintain a selection parity from Verity into Navisworks. You can also move from Navisworks back into Verity by manually using this import selection from host button, and that will switch you to whatever object in Navisworks that we match it up with in Verity. Now, as we bring things into Verity, you'll notice we've added a Verity tab in Navisworks for that item, and this gives us a globally unique identifier property that we've added. This just allows us to maintain a link between the item in Verity and the element in Navisworks. This is why it's important to save the Navisworks NWF file before closing out, because as soon as you close Navisworks, if you haven't saved, those GUIDs will be lost and you will not have this link back and forth between the two. All the data will be retained, but you won't be able to connect one to the other. Now, I can continue to add items this way by picking them individually or holding down the control key and adding to Verity. You can click Add to Verity as many times as you want. Don't worry about clicking the same item twice, because we have the GUID to work with. We'll know if you've already added that item into Verity before, and we won't allow there to be duplicates. For today, I'm just going to go through and grab the two different selection sets that I've saved. One has all the items, and one has the different scans that I want to use. You'll see those selected in the tree here and in context in Navisworks. You'll see I'm only picking 5 out of the 13 scans in the data set for this. I'm going to go ahead and click Add to Verity again, and this will bring the scans and the items in. You'll see the scans will show up over here in the left smaller table, and the items will then show up over here on the right. And in this selection set, we have about 50 items to take a look at and go through, and we've got the 5 scans. Navisworks also has a window selection tool under the Home tab. And this will allow you to grab a large area or a small area in Navisworks and pick up any of the objects within it. If you use this, though, you have the likelihood of bringing in smaller objects, elbows, nuts, bolts that you may not want to analyze. When you bring items into Verity, you'll see that we bring in the item description from Navisworks and the geometry surface area. These are both sortable, and this allows you to go identify smaller items. And then if you want to, you can use Shift and Control Select in our table as well. And then the Remove button here will remove those items from Verity so that we won't analyze them. In addition, we have a mechanism for dealing with items that get grouped. So Navisworks has a tendency to group items together sometimes, and this depends on the file structure. But if I grab this piece of conduit and add it to Verity, you'll see that rather than getting the individual conduit, what Navis has done is defined the first geometry node as being the entire conduit system. And so once this is done pulling in, you'll see that there's about 100 different pieces of conduit that are all effectively grouped together into a single system. That's not going to be something that's going to be useful to analyze together. We do have the ability to explode these, and what that does is basically work its way down the geometry tree in Navisworks and find smaller parts and pieces that it can bring in. So here you'll see at the bottom of the table we've got a number of conduits, conduit fittings, all making up that original system. So at this point, however, I'm going to go ahead and get those out of here so that we're not analyzing them today. And then that gets us back to our original set of items here. And with that, we are pretty much ready to run the analyze command. Really, the only other things to note are that if you bring in geometry into Navisworks from some of the less common sources, you may notice that geometry comes in grouped in different ways. There's usually more than one way to get a particular type of file into Navisworks, so it's definitely worth trying exporting to a DWG or DXF or one of the more common formats that Navisworks imports, and see if that gives you better results in terms of bringing those items into Verity. And with that, we'll wrap up part 2 and move on to part 3.